Today on Women Love AI, I'm excited to welcome someone who's been in the AI world for so long. We are thrilled to welcome the insightful author, Anat Deracine. Anat brings a unique voice to the conversation around artificial intelligence, gender, and tech industry's culture. She blends narrative fiction with deep commentary on the often invisible barriers women face in the AI and tech space. A passionate storyteller and former technologist, Anna joins us to discuss her journey, her writing, and how we can shape a more equitable future for AI. Welcome to the show. It's such a joy to speak with you today.
Thank you, Alina.
Before we dive into your writing, your books, and the exciting work that you're doing, I would love for our listeners to get to know you a little bit better. Can you share a little bit about your background, your previous roles, and how you found your way into AI?
So I grew up all over the world. I was born in India, but then I grew up in Iraq, in Baghdad, until the Iraq-Iran war. Then moved to Saudi Arabia, stayed in Saudi Arabia for 10 years through the Gulf War. And then after that, moved to Canada. And one of the things that, hopefully people know is that Saudi Arabia isn't the best place for women. Women's rights are very limited, and women's access to the basic things like education, career, technology are all very, very gate kept. One of the things that has always been of interest to me is the ways in which technology can actually empower and liberate women who are often kept away from technology that might free them. And so my first novel, and I've been writing my entire life, and so I was always sure that I wanted to write books. My first novel, which is called Driving by Starlight, is about a young woman growing up in Saudi Arabia at the time when women were not yet given the right to drive. She dresses up as a boy and then drag races cars at night. It was very fun and lighthearted for me to
Yes.
write. And it was a way to engage with my own childhood, where I also learned to drive kind of by passing as a boy. That was such a wonderful piece of technology that allowed people to feel safer on the road and to drive to places they'd never been and know that if they missed an exit, then the maps would tell them where to go next. And so for me, the ways in which technology can actually just change and shape society have always been interesting. And that's why my career for the last 20 years has been in tech. And I'm currently an executive in the tech industry. The thing that has always been driving me is the capacity that technology has for good and for driving changes in society. And so I've been writing since then. So my second novel, it's called Her Golden Coast. It's about two women who have slightly dysfunctional families. And so they try to run away from their dysfunctional families and go to California to start up work in the tech industry. And the tech industry, as we knew it then, was pretty toxic to women. It was still less toxic than their families. And so through their career in tech, they found financial independence, and they also found a lot of sense of self-worth from their ability to engage with technology. And that allows them to engage with their families and reconnect in a much more meaningful way. And so, like all my books, the next one is called The Divine Comedy of the Tech Sisterhood. It's about all the ways in which the workplace isn't really set up for women, but the ways in which women can together change and shape it for the better. And of course, now we are in the age of AI. My upcoming novel, which is called Algorithms of Betrayal, is about AI and how it's reshaping society. And it's the story of five people who have been adversely affected by the AI revolution, who then get together and decide to take control.
So, all the work, all the writing is driven by two primary themes, right? The tech culture and the gender, right? The gender balance. Has any of this work been inspired by your personal experiences going up the ladder in the tech industry?
Oh, absolutely. And when I first joined tech, I was introduced to the rest of the team as the token cool person. So I was the only woman. I was the only woman on many, many teams when I first started. That's thankfully no longer the case. Now we have a much more gender balanced and racially balanced leadership team. And it's wonderful to see how far we've come. But yes, a lot of this is based not only on my own experiences, but the experiences of the women around me. Between 20 years, you see a lot. And so just some of the kinds of things that others in my circle have experienced also become fodder for how my fiction goes.
Absolutely. And I think it could be mega interesting to see how all these discrepancies and gaps are going to be highlighted by AI, shine a light on all the issues that have been for the last few decades in this ecosystem. So tell us a little bit more about the latest book. I think this is one of the most interesting stories I've heard lately, and especially that you chose to add humor.
So in Algorithms of Betrayal, the protagonist is kind of a dork. He is a bit of a man child. One reviewer calls it that he has the opposite of whatever you call the opposite of emotional intelligence. He has gotten by because he's a good hacker, but that's not going to cut it anymore. He has no social skills to speak of. As he's turning 40, he gets laid off from this AI company that he kind of helped build. He built this AI company with his friends, and then all of a sudden he's out on his butt and his friends have taken over. And so he's very betrayed and very sad. But he is a little bit in denial when you first meet him because he's like, oh, I'll get another job and then I'll show them. And then he realizes that he can't get another job because a lot of the companies are using AI to read resumes. There's like any yellow or red flag about a candidate that immediately shared across the HR systems across the industry. And so he can't get a job because the HR systems have flagged him. He realizes that there are other people in the same position and they all are coming to him saying, can we fight back? And so the premise of this novel is like they decide to go back and fight, like secretly hack into their own company's AI and poison the ML model with. And so it's a marketing company that generates creative ads on behalf of other companies. And then what happens is once it's poisoned, those ads are quite inappropriate. And of course, that's not going to end well for anybody. But also, as he's doing this and he's hacking into his own company, he notices that somebody else is trying to do the same thing. There are state actors who are using AI to attack because now it's like easier to find vulnerabilities with AI, it's easier to hack with AI. So there's state actors who are trying to hack into his company and his ML model. And of course, this creates, for somebody with like completely no social skills, all kinds of drama because he's like, wait a minute, I was trying to poison this ML model, but like I get to break it because it's mine. But who are you to come in and try to ransom or steal my ML model? So now he's got torn loyalties. And it also happens that the head of security for the AI company is his ex-girlfriend. She's extremely competent at her job, and she's gonna come after him and be extra pissed at what he's doing.
Wow, what a twist. Now I really want to read the story and I'm going to read it as soon as I get my hands on it.
Yes. So of the 5 people who kinda get together to do this heist, one of them is a marketer, and she used to be writing these very tailored ads, but now she doesn't have to because the AI just throws spaghetti at the wall and sees what sticks. And then so she's just like a prompt engineer now who has to just babysit the AI, and she's not pleased about that, got a pay cut for it. Another one is a writer for an academic journal, and that academic journal, without telling her, decided to give away all of their prior work to train a model in Canada. And so all of her writing has gone to this company in Canada. And also on the personal front, where she writes romance novels, the AI romance novels that are trained on her romance novels are doing better than her own romance novels. Then there's an artist. And of course, artists, we know how they feel about AI being trained on their creative work and copyright. And then there's a lawyer who had hoped to get in on the inside and shape the laws and rules of societies and how AI is governed. But when she tried to speak up about something that the AI company was doing, she got fired because she was trying to sort of say that we shouldn't be doing this use case. And so these are all people who have tried to put the genie back in the bottle, and that's not going to work. And so it's also a story of them moving through the stages of grief accepting AI is not going to go away, but who are we and how do we have meaning and how do we make a difference in this new world where we accept the existence of AI as a given? How can we use it for good? How can we control the ways in which it could be used as a weapon?
In your opinion, how can writers, artists, storytellers shape public perception of AI different from the technologists and the engineers? And what roles have creatives to play in the way we perceive AI and the way we shape AI?
So there's a lot. And so one of the main things that I would say is a friend of mine who's a writer also talked about the transition between, eco fiction, where you climate fiction, where you would talk about all the dangerous ways in which we were kind of affecting our planet, to what we now call solar punk. And in solar punk, you don't so much talk about the things that are bad and horrible about, the way in which we're treating our planet, but rather we focus on what can we do differently? How can we change it? What could the future look like? And it's less about critique and more about imagination. And so imagining that better world is an act of hope. And I think that's the place where all creative people have a huge, huge part to play. And in terms of what are the kinds of things, like I would love to see writers talking about sci-fi worlds where AI is used for good and like where near future sci-fi worlds, like not space opera, but just in terms of like where could we be in 5 years? What are the things that will have been solved that we don't have to have, we've not been able to solve for so long? And then on the artist front, right? Like I think, I also have many artist friends because I used to write for a webtoon. I would love to see where you can use AI to do the boring stuff and the hard labor intensive stuff and how we can, for instance, like backgrounds, coloring, these are the things that take up a lot of time. Do they need to take that much time? Like, is that where creative minds are really best spent? And I think of it more as the creative person is driving the bus and AI is like a good navigation tool, but it is not driving the bus.
100%. They're still humans, humans in the loop, humans in the driving seat. Take, for example, the corporate world, right? The corporate world is coming up with use cases every single day, but they are nothing outside of what we already know, right? So they're not that futuristic and they're not outside of the current reality.
I think that's a transitional phase for where we are right now because the skill level is so low, right? Like people don't understand AI well enough to know what it could do and what it seems like it could do, but it really can't. There was recently the study of like, well, AI is really, really good at generating an essay or a summary of information. It is really bad at adding small numbers. And it's like, why is an AI that is that powerful so bad at adding small numbers? And it's because of how AI works, because it's kind of more guesswork and looking at what the data content has and not as much of reasoning, although that's changing. But what that means is that people often think that AI can do things that it can't do, or they think that it cannot do things that it can do. And that understanding of what is possible and what is just like not going to be possible for maybe at least another 2, 3 years, that doesn't exist very broadly. And so, even for instance, in the tech industry, people who are practitioners don't know, right? They have to sort of try experiments and then see, well, oh, actually, it's not that good at this. So, I think that's the reason for some of the limited imagination.
If we talk a little bit about the values and about the bias that exists in us, and then we transfer it to the models, especially when it comes to gender, diversity, inclusion, that bias that we transfer over to the AI models.
I think, we've known this is something that has been the case for a long time. Generative AI is just where it becomes part of the public consciousness. But regular old school AI had this problem too, right? Because essentially, if you feed data that is biased in some way to an ML model, it learns that bias, perpetuates it, amplifies it, and then thinks that that's the reality. And so you have to sort of think about what is your data set? What are the inherent biases in your data set? And do you want those biases or do you want to correct for them? And so I think in terms of where the state of the art is today, I think there are both like overcorrections and undercorrections. So a lot of the internet is people screaming at each other. And if you overcorrect for that, I think OpenAI has overcorrected for these things in multiple ways in the past that have been hilarious. There's the part, one thing that does get referenced in my book is the time when, AI basically became extremely horny because it was trained on the internet and the internet has a lot of porn on it. And then it was trying to overcorrect, but then the overcorrector kind of failed. And so it went extremely on the other side and became extremely inappropriate. And then recently, we've seen from OpenAI the thing of where it became sycophantic, where it just kept capitulating to the person and like, oh, you're the best, you're the most wonderful person. There's something where you notice these things after the fact, and we're not always able to prevent them, but we have to be aware of them. We have to think about, okay, what are we perpetuating when we put these models out that are essentially giant megaphones for the biases that we have had historically?
We are playing a key role in training AI, right? Teaching
Yes.
us probably every single day how we like to be spoken to, address answers to our questions. We're training like we're training some toddler. So, one question on culture, tech culture in particular, because AI is no different. It's inherited all the values, I assume. So,
Yeah.
if you had the magic wand to rewrite the Silicon Valley tech culture to fit within an idealistic AI space and world, how would you portray that?
I mean, hindsight is always 2020, right? But I think the main things that would come to mind for me, one is there's an inherent way in which all algorithms and machine learning models, like all automation, has the capacity to codify things that were previously squishy. So, for example, like whether you get to be a remote worker or you have to go back into the office, in many companies, that's a matter of manager discretion. Manager gets to decide you're working fine. Go ahead, do whatever you need to do, work from wherever you need to be. But that doesn't work in an algorithmic or ML world. Like all the decisions have to be consistent and they have to be done at scale in a very way. This can be good if like you have guardrails to prevent abuse and things like that. But as a simple example, one of the things that ended up being one of the reasons for the premise in this book is you often have in America credit scores. Credit scores can affect your future potential buying opportunity and so on. And if your initial credit score is not good, you're kind of stuck. Nothing changes for you. You can't get break out of the system. And it turned out that statistically across the country, Black people were being given lower credit scores. But it wasn't like, and if you codified that into an AI, the AI would learn, oh, if it's a Black person, I need to give them a lower starting credit score.
That's scary.
Right. And that's the kind of thing where AI and algorithms in general have the potential to codify the judgments that are happening at scale. So, for instance, over the last 20 years, the tech industry has shifted, and there are no longer these sort of snap judgments that get made about, oh, women can't lead. People have the judgment now to understand what to value, and they take these individual nuances into account. And so I would actually say that a lot of our promotion processes and hiring processes are more fair when they're done by humans. But there's this belief that somehow machines are more objective. And they're not. Machines are just going to codify whatever the prevalent position is. That doesn't make them more objective. And so I think to get at the heart of your question, there are certain myths about meritocracy and objectivity that I would like to not be assumed. Machines are not actually more objective. They are codifying the majority's subjective view and calling that objectivity. And if we don't recognize that, then you will always have systems that default to penalizing minorities because they look different than whatever the codified norm is.
Sounds very scary, the example that you gave, right? And I think that's why human emotional intelligence is still such a valid skill for any sort of circumstance. So, Anna, please tell us about the book, when the book is coming out, when it's going to be launched, where people can find it, and why everyone should get their hands on it.
I certainly hope so. So the book is called Algorithms of Betrayal, and you should be able to get it June 15th. And if you're in London, then I am around to meet with people and talk about the book as well. You should be able to get it anywhere after June 15th.
Sounds great. I'll make sure to add the link to the book under this video so people can find it easier. Thank you so much, Anat. What a joy and what a pleasure. Really appreciate your time. And I was blown away when we first spoke about your books and about your work in AI. So I hope people found this really insightful and interesting.
Thank you so much for having me. And this has been an absolute pleasure.